Hello there and welcome. I'm your moderator today, Sage Goodwin, and as always, I'm joined by the lovely Samit Halvadia, CTO of Remo3, and today we're talking with Jeff Ulatoski, the project manager for VMware's App Volumes, and we're going to be diving deep into some of Jeff's history in the space, as well as discussing the evolution of app containerization in the EUC space and the history of app delivery in that context. So, let's jump right in.
Wow,
Jeff.
that's a lot to cover, Sage.
It's a lot. I know. We've got a packed episode today.
I'm excited.
But as always, like the Remo3 podcast, we want to kind of dive deep into our guest's history a little bit, as well as the industry as a whole, because we've got a wide variety of different partners that we work with, and we're continuing the evolution with VMware, and we just want to kind of have a conversation of the space around app containerization and app delivery. So I think it's going to be a good one.
Jeff, thank you so much for joining. I know you and I have talked about applications, I don't know, probably for the last 5 years together in some in some capacity or some form. But for those folks that don't really know you, Jeff, do you want to give us a quick, 3-minute, I'm Jeff Ulatoski, and this is what I'm all about?
I'm sure. So I'm Jeff Ulatoski, and this is what I'm all about.
Perfect.
So it's really short, right? No, I've been I've been with technology for a long time, and I've done different things, different aspects of technology and application development, application. I've spent a decade in IT actually managing applications, working for a director of applications, and delivering large enterprise applications, which aren't even called applications at that point. They're like systems like SharePoint and Documentum and
Sure.
SMP. And then also the smallest little instrument controller applications for our scientists and things like that. So I spent a lot of time, and that was in itself interesting. And then moving into to VMware through an acquisition of Cloud Volumes. So I spent a lot of time working with apps, been focused on apps, and now responsible for our app strategy here in the UC.
That's awesome. So here's an interesting thing, right? And I always kind of liken this to, I've been in the app space my entire career, but I've had the lens of being a vendor almost my entire life, right? You said you've spent a decade actually doing the application lifting, the modernizations, the management and lifecycle component. Like, over those 10 years, like, can you give me some insights that you gleaned that made you decide to want to go to a vendor? Were you trying to solve a problem when you decided to go to Cloud Volumes, or was it just all happenstance?
Well, you know how things go, right? It's a combination always of happenstance, fortune, and just the fact that you see things and you want to work on them and do them.
Yeah.
So I think even moving into IT, it was right around the Y2K time frame. Moving into IT was even kind of a bit of a happenstance. It was a nice place to be. Shifted from
Sure.
as a software developer, kind of and writing applications. You also do IT work for yourself too. So always kind of like working in IT and working in software. I really thought this was a good place to be, especially right after the .coms kind of did their wonderful things. So I think that apps have come a long way. Like, I remember working on applications from a very young age. I think I was 10 years old when I wrote my first application. It was a friend of my folks came over and said, "Hey Jeff, you can do this," and they pulled it up on my IBM PC Junior, my little teeny computer, and they said, "Hey, look, you can do input a $." And at that point, I was like, "Wow, I can like make this do things." And from that point forward, following along. I mean, they were actually not even called apps. Apps is kind of a term that's come along, right? I mean, they were originally called programs.
Yeah.
Programmers, and we came to apps and coders at some point. But it was like there were programmers and they wrote programs, and it's evolved. And a lot of the stuff we see today with like cloud and what's happening there, that's an evolution, but it's also a pendulum, right? I mean, we saw mainframes shift to being the compute is not happening on the device, it's happening here, and then we see the shift come back. And so applications have just kind of evolved to, oh, they're going to be client server, now they're going to be all on the client. Now they're going to be thin, now thick. We can go back and forth. And I think a couple of the points where there were really a change was, we had these individual applications on your personal computer, and that was courtesy of Windows, and
Right.
DOS made it possible but really, I think Windows, I remember sorting all of the little app icons in different windows. You could actually put them in there, and then it was basically like what we call our portals, like Workspace ONE Intelligence today, or Workspace ONE Catalog, where you can just like click an app and have it launch. That was like Windows first did that. And then that became the start bar. And, so management of apps is always, I just liked sorting them when I was a kid, just like putting them in different places and trying to categorize them. Are they utilities? Are they, how do they get sorted? How do I manage my portfolio of apps, which is what, IT folks are trying to figure out today. And so then apps like evolved, right? They became these things that were web-based. Like that was a huge change. And that was right around
definitely
2002, 2003, right? You remember that when that happened?
I do. And I mean, it's funny that you talk about like organizing the icons and applications in a meaningful way so that you can be a little bit more efficient, right? People have been still trying to solve that app segmentation problem. So like it just popped up into me like a 10-year-old Jeff being the OG of app segmentation on his Windows 3.1. And I'm just like, this is perfect, right? And there's some truth to that to this day, right? Where people are trying to say, okay, this is a client server application, or this one requires this backend infrastructure. This is for this line of business. This application is business critical for, it needs to be hosted on-prem. This one can go to the cloud. People are still, trying to solve this application segmentation problem today. It's just obviously the permutations have multiplied by XYZ exponentially, right? So it's so interesting. And I'd never thought of that, right? Because I did that too. I think everyone kind of did that, especially in college, where you're like, okay, here are all my MP3s, here are all my apps, here are all my players. Like you had all these things kind of set up. And I never likened that to the fact that like IT is struggling with that same type of challenge, obviously at a much bigger scale today. So that's an interesting thought.
Yeah. And that was something that when I moved into IT, I kind of thought my boss was a little bit crazy. Like, and he would admit it too. Like he wanted there to be one place where all your apps were, right? He wanted one place where you could click an app and it would launch. And so I was actually working I was hired as a programmer analyst, and later became a business analyst, right? But we were working to figure out how we could do that. We actually had what was called the Launchpad, which was a start bar inside the intranet that you could actually launch applications. And so we had different applications and things. And I had built a custom where you could add and remove your own internal applications. So like when you were on your machine, you had your start bar, right? In Windows 95. But it got to the point where we had that internal version of a start bar, and we were able to launch applications. And that actually ended up, we weren't able to get all the applications to do what we wanted to do, because some were thick clients, some were thin. And, we're working on solving those problems today as well. But it was that concept was there, and so we actually did some things even back, and this is like 2001, 2002. With having a web page launch applications, and it was a lot of fun.
The original storefront, if you will, right? The original shop catalog. Now that and that's interesting. And by the way, at that time, like you said, they weren't necessarily applications. They could have just been programs. But you look at that, the sheer volume is what, maybe 20, maybe 30. Not 3,000, certainly not 30,000, right? So the fact that the same type of methodology around delivering applications and trying to launch them is the fact that it still exists today is just mind-boggling to me, right? Like people have tried to do different things like micro apps, and they've tried to do outcome-based, parts and microservices of an application, and that just hasn't resonated over time. People still need the whole honking app for whatever reason.
Remember Flapplications?
I do remember.
Flash. That was probably 2004 when we were like trying to figure out how to make one of the offshoots I did. It was a startup, and it was called Sheer Power, and we used Flash before HTML5 became a thing, and so one thing I've noticed is that technology it evolves, but it doesn't go away.
Yeah.
Your VGA monitor, like that still uses A000 memory address. They're still using some of that stuff today, right? The concept of base memory in a system is still pretty much there with the extended bit that goes on. A lot of these things stay, and we just build kind of on top of them. And so I've seen with applications like this full application stuff that we did, HTML5 came out. Basically, jQuery started to solve that problem with application, and now jQuery is everywhere, and it's still using the same old HTML that would make that web page with a rainbow in it. That it's the same technology, and so when we modernize applications, we have to be aware of those types of things as well. So it's exciting. I mean, it's exciting to know that there's so much rich history, as short-lived as technology and application. Concept of a program and an app. You go back to Tron and how programs were running wild. that stuff's all very it's all very new in the grand scheme of the whole world, right? And in reality, we've already created so much history in such a short period of time, and that history is there with us.
You've got such a positive outlook on that, Jeff, because I've been doing this grind for such a long time. You call it rich history of apps. I call it technical debt. It's the same word. So now you have modern solutions that have to solve 20-year-old problems. And, anyone can tell you, whether it's infrastructure based, whether it's workspace based, whether it's, just application development in general, moving things into, a line of business app and moving it to PaaS or rewriting it, refactoring it. There's a lot of beautiful logic that's been built in over time. But now we need modern solutions to very legacy based problems, which kind of leads me to Cloud Volumes. And how that was maybe the first iteration of trying to solve a problem that had existed, that manifested itself, that you saw in your directorship or IT role. What was that transition like for you?
To Cloud Volumes?
Yeah.
Well, there was a stint of world travel in there that got in there. I
got refreshed.
I left my job. It was kind of an idea of stealing a little bit of my retirement early, and kind of saying I've been in IT for 10 years and realized that I needed just a little bit of a break, and went and traveled the world, and with the plans to come back potentially at some point,
maybe
in IT, or maybe, right? There was always that. My trip was supposed to be 3 months. It ended up being 2 years. I ended up traveling to like over 50 countries in 300 different cities, and just I literally lived out of a backpack and traveled and saw the world.
Did you have a blog?
I tried, and my friend said, I'm not a writer. I don't have a book. The only writing I've done is code.
Okay.
And realistically, like I tried doing a blog, and it was spit and polish, right? And my friend basically took the sail out of the wind out of my sail. Thankfully, very early on, I was in Ireland and I was writing, and he says, this sounds more like a travel brochure. I want to hear more about you. And then at that point, I went, okay, I'm going to be selfish, and I'm just going to experience. And, there are times I wish I did, but I took a lot of photos. I had, 100,000 photos. Right. But yeah, it's and a lot of them not very good. But I did try. And I really respect the people that do that, because especially when they do, things like podcasts and things like that, because it's a lot of work. So.
Well, you're obviously a different type of influencer, not modern day influencers in the wild, right? So I guess that's all right. You're an EUC influencer.
But you had this like adventure for 2 years, and then you came back and you're like, Cloud Volumes, time to go.
It was actually more like Cloud Volumes brought me back.
Okay.
I had a friend call me, and he said, I want you to talk to this guy by the name of Matt Conover, one of the founders of Cloud Volumes. And he said, I want to show you this technology, and we could use your help. And so I'm at a remote, I was living in Malaysia at the time, and I'm in a remote house down at the foothills of the Cameron Highlands, the place where you could escape to get a little bit of cool air. Yeah. And I'm on a cell phone, doing a Zoom call, much like what we are now, and I get a demo of what they're doing on my iPhone, and I'm like, wow, that is game changing. Like that is, I was in IT and I went, yeah, I want to help you guys. This is, and then I had already been writing some code. I was doing stuff at the time, like I was putting in an art installation. I was doing some stuff with, trying to, play around, because after a bunch of traveling, I actually got the itch for technology again. So I was doing some Arduino stuff and playing with, LED lights and seeing what I could do with Arduinos. And then my friend called me, and that was it. I was sold. I said, are you kidding me? You can deliver apps. There's no pixie boots, and we're not like imaging machines, and we're not doing all of this challenging stuff that made my job really difficult back in IT, and we're able to deliver them instantly. That was amazing. That sold me on Cloud Volumes, and I came back. It was a rough entry for other reasons. All the rest of the reality coming back in, but at least I was able to stay. If you guys are in a startup, you know how it is. You stay focused. You're down. Your head's down, and you're really working hard. And that's that got me through probably the transition back. But I absolutely was enamored by the raw tech, and so that's when I came back and said, yes, we could do so much with this.
Yeah. And what's interesting is, like, how long was that stint inside of Cloud Volumes before the acquisition into VMware, right? Because I think you guys were just hitting your stride, because I remember following that technology, because prior I was the admin studio and install shield product manager, right? And we were looking at interesting technologies, supporting Softricity, which eventually became AppV, and ThinApp and ThinStall, which was acquired by VMware prior to that. And there was just an evolution. There were shortcomings in each of those containerization technologies, some which can be overcome by poking holes in them at that point, just devaluing the entire value of a container. So when we were starting to look at Cloud Volumes at that point, you guys had taken a slightly different approach to containerization and masking. I think you guys might have been one of the first that were kind of in that type of space. And can you tell me about that kind of little trajectory of, you get started, you build the tech, and then all of a sudden, as you're gaining momentum, you're off the market?
That was kind of an insane whirlwind, right? So we were working heads down. We realized that the technology needed to have the app compat. We needed to make it easy. Our CEO said 10 minutes to smile, I think it was. I don't want to misquote him, but basically wanted to be able to get the customer up and running in 10 minutes. And so that was the ideal thing. I was brought in to diversify the product, bring in the Microsoft aspects of it. That's why we have our VHD based solutions today. And so I built that piece of the product. But as you mentioned, it was that probably in a combination of some other things, that now it was beyond just a VMware piece of technology. And it was starting to, we had other different technologies that were doing more like building machines and doing layering and things like that in machines. And then we had, different technologies that were approaching it slightly differently. And what I think made us, it was a lot harder, I think, and it took us some growing pains, especially as we, shed some of that App Volumes 2x time period. But we started with real-time delivery, which is what gave us the on-demand apps right now. And so that starting with that gave us that ability to really think from that approach from the beginning. And even though we were doing it at login for the longest time and merging apps together in app stacks because we needed to rewrite the agent support stuff, that was the key differentiator. That mixed with the fact that we bring the apps to the OS as a normal application. So we're not, we're technologies like ThinApp, which we use, and there's technologies like MSIX that isolate and kind of bring that level of isolation, which is awesome for some use cases.
Sure.
But the idea of being able to just have the app exist as if it had just been naturally installed by the user, clicking through an installer, but delivering it on demand in seconds, that was the key, I think, for us personally as a success.
Well, I mean, I think about that mounting, the concept of mounting, for lack of a better term, right? As an instantaneous availability. And the fact is, it's not just one app. No enterprise app works as a standalone app almost. You have what you call the app stack merge, right? And I think the ability to mount a VHD that allows the customers and our partners to achieve outcomes of using these three applications to create a billing report at the end of it every fiscal year or whatever it might be ends up becoming a much more interesting use case that some of the containerization technologies couldn't necessarily solve because of the fact that they were isolation based as opposed to what you're talking about with the mounting based components. So I think that was probably one of the most compelling use cases for when we start talking about like the VHD and the mounting piece. And I think with MSIX, they're trying to bridge a little bit of that, Jeff, where MSIX itself is a container that installs cleanly, uninstalls cleanly, minimizes wind rot. But then you look at App Attach, and that's kind of that next level where they're trying to do a very similar thing around on-demand delivery and being able to mount it as opposed to make it instantaneously available as opposed to going through that traditional install process, right?
Exactly. I think what I like most about MSIX is and where Microsoft's going with that is they're able to put a kind of a stake in the ground and say, we want apps to be here.
Yeah.
And so it's because they're reinventing MSI as a technology into MSIX, it will lend them to be, containerizable and better to as the developers start building these applications and using the MSIX technology to do their installers, we'll be able to see a much easier ingestion of applications. And that's why we invested in App Volumes as well, to bring in that MSIX technology right into App Volumes so that we could deliver those the same as our own format as well.
Mm-hmm. A question kind of for both of you guys. As we touch on, there's a couple problems that everyone's trying to solve here. What are some of the ways that you see this kind of, as each of these different technologies come out, where do you see this evolving to solve those problems?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we've got something that we've been focusing on called Apps Everywhere, and this is a really our moment. We spend a lot of time at VMware and with our Horizon and Workspace ONE products, focusing on the delivery, right? Yeah. That's really around getting the app to the machine. And even with App Volumes, it's been packaging, entitlement, delivery. But what we're doing is we're broadening that. We're realizing there is a conversation to be had in the organization around the practices or the activities around managing applications. And there's whether it's discovery of those applications, testing, packaging, and then testing, which is where Remo 3 is really coming in there and helping, and the idea of that entitlement, the delivery, but also being able to have that undo button, as you mentioned, without the wind rot capabilities, and same with App Volumes, being able to kind of take away that app really quickly, and then bring a new version of an app in the next reboot. That idea of being able to do these functions, coupled with telemetry about what the user's doing, and then self-service, being able to enable the user to do. So we're looking at all of those things. And that's a conversation that I would have, I go back to where we were talking about my director of applications, someone that was kind of easy and wanted to do all this stuff. And I hope he gets a chance to listen to this. I think he'd enjoy it. That he had all these dreams. That's the stuff that we're actually doing, that we can actually bring in all of those capabilities, have a conversation just around apps. Instead of jumping right into the VDI desktop or jumping right into how we're going to get the app to the machine. We can talk about all of the things to really make sure that you're spending the right time, making sure your apps are up to date and you're able to give the users what they need. I mean, we have the phones today. My mother can get her own. She's got probably 5 or 6 photo editing applications. She's done it all by herself. I'm amazed at how she's figured this all stuff out. I showed her stuff for years on the computer, and she would didn't really want any of that, right? And so like for her now, she's like, check this out, and she could just edit a photo, and she does it right on her phone, and she just went to an app store and got it. And we want to be able to give the IT folks the confidence that they can give that to their users, right? We want to make sure that when they come out and have a need for this app that they used at the last company they were in, that we can bring it into the portfolio, and things to be able to package and test that application, like with what Remo's doing there, being able to figure out which apps how easily you can ingest those apps and get them into a more modern format. Those are the kinds of things that make it so that you can broaden the portfolio. And then being able to see from a telemetry perspective the actual usage of an app, because you don't want to keep updating CVEs on an application that nobody's using. And so this is like all of these things come together, and if we can give that solution, that toolbox, and all the right tools, and that's really what makes an IT person successful, is not one thing that does everything, but a set of tools that makes them successful in their job. If we can bring those tools to them and help them, then I think we can make IT safe, secure, and also very usable, just like we do with downloading a photo app on a phone.
Yeah, I mean, you're 100% right, Jeff. And I mean, we've taken a nice journey to get to this point, Sage, right? We've talked about what it used to be like. We've talked about some of the challenges historically, and those challenges have persisted over time. And if anything, because of the pace of innovation of technology, the pace of innovation of delivering workspaces, VDI, DAS, the accessibility to workspaces now is more prevalent and turnkey than ever, for lack of a better term. The problem still remains, am I going to be productive without my applications? And I think that this apps everywhere that Jeff is alluding to is very much a step in the direction towards helping alleviate some of those concerns, right? People really just want to understand, can I safely get my application into my workspace? And to your credit, Jeff, and to VMware, you know, I come from a Citrix background, and they understood the importance of apps. You come from VMware, and you understand the importance of apps, but this is the first time that I'm seeing a major EUC vendor that has historically been focused on delivering an amazing workspace experience, whether it's persistent, whether it's pooled and optimizing costs, actually focus on the application delivery component of it as well, right? And the best part is, it's not meant to be proprietary. Do right by the customer. You want to use App Attach, use App Attach. You want to use App Vols, use App Vols. Use Remo 3 as part of this overall apps everywhere process to help you determine what's the best candidate to deliver based on the workspace that you're building, right? And then remove it in the event that something goes wrong, or in the event that you don't want that particular application. So when you start looking at this kind of self-service kiosk, enterprise kiosk, because let's be clear, you know, when you start looking at, you know, Chocolatey is awesome and AppGet was awesome, and I still think that there's a place for those technologies, but enterprises need an enterprise app store. Because an enterprise app store has your homegrown applications, it has all your customizations around commercial off-the-shelf applications, and those things are basically what you need to get your job done. So when we talk about apps everywhere, and I know next week, we're going to be at VMware Explore. You see, yes. I got it right. I did it. It's not VMworld, it's VMware Explore. You know, there's going to be some very exciting announcements that are coming out around both our partnership, Jeff, and then also, is there anything you can share about that, like, without putting you into too much trouble here?
Well, I can tell you that we are going to have an announcement. If you haven't already, sign up for there's a class on RDSH about watering your apps or your RDSH forms. So definitely check that out. There's a new feature that we're working on that I think is going to revolutionize the way we do published apps. So I'm excited to. I know it's not much to tell you now, but
that's. Well, I mean, that's a pretty big teaser. Revolutionize the way you leverage published apps. Yeah. That's 20 years old, that technology. You're changing it.
That's the goal. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, now I'm very excited to check out watering your published apps, which is very cool. Yeah, so I am excited about some of the upcoming partnerships, and I'm really excited to hear more about this announcement here, Jeff. Sage, did you have any other questions that you wanted to potentially get through here?
I think we touched on most of the points that I had in store for us. It was a great discussion, and I know I greatly enjoyed having taking a back seat and letting you guys discuss the state of app containerization and app delivery today.
That was awesome.
Yeah, it's always a lot of fun to do these types of sessions, Jeff, because when you look at yeah, we've been in the same space for a long time, but what's very clear on this is we had two very different perspectives coming into it. One where you actually saw and lived the problem for a decade and tried to solve it internally and build out a solution, and me, where I'm looking at a volume of problems and trying to figure out what we can do to kind of solutionize it. And what's funny is we've now met, in 2022
Right?
at VMware Explore, we've met in the middle finally.
Absolutely. And I'm looking forward to seeing you there next week. So it'll be a lot of fun.
So I think it's a unique experience too. Like you have this deep understanding of the problems that people face in the IT industry. Like you were in that space for a good amount of time. And I think it was a good kind of perspective to have on the podcast.
Awesome. And I'd like to say it was all planned, but I've been riding the wave of life, and it just takes me in the directions I go. So
happenstance and timing, baby.
Oh, yes. The most powerful tools in your arsenal.
Jeff, I appreciate you coming on. As always, it's always an invigorating discussion with you. Sage, thank you so much for hosting, and I guess we'll see you guys next episode.
Nice. For you guys anytime. Thank you so much. Appreciate you having me.
Remo 3 offers automated pre-deployment testing of Windows applications, OS updates, and security patches. Use unattended automation to test and assess application readiness for Windows 10, Windows 11, Windows 365, Azure Virtual Desktop, as well as identifying MSIX and multi-session suitability. Your apps, your workspace, our priority.